Hello viewers, my name is Millie Havens, and I want to welcome you to our first episode of a new show called Explorations. And I am an artist. I've been painting for about 20 years, and I'm privileged to have with me today 3 artists who are going to share who they are as artists, how they create their work, and how they've evolved over time as an artist. I have Ron Husband, and Ron is a well-known animation artist. He also does quick sketches and illustration. Eric Watkins, and Eric is known for his fabulous pen and ink drawings. And we have Joan Whitenack with us, and she is known for her realistic oil paintings. So welcome all to Explorations. I'm so glad you're here. Ron, I just wanted to ask you, could you tell us a little bit about your professional art background?
I was born and raised here in Monrovia. Went to Citrus College, and from there to University of Las Vegas, and from there I ended up at Disney. Started there in 1975. Worked there for 38 years in a number of productions: Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Atlantis, a whole bunch of stuff. I had an opportunity to work on my time there, so it's sort of how I've gotten into just doing some my artwork, and I'm doing pen and ink work that I've had opportunities to do that throughout my career, and so now in retirement I'm doing a little bit more of that. So that's sort of where I am right now.
Oh, you've had a long career. You know, you've been at Disney, and I want to ask you a question about Disney. You've done so many features there and so much animation. What were your challenges creating for Disney and for the films that you created your animation in?
The big challenge was to make the characters conform with the story. Mm-hmm. If the story point called for a character to be sad or happy or whatever emotion that it was called for, that was the challenge to make the characters be exactly what the script called for. You know, the sadness or happiness or enraged or in love, whatever the emotion was. That was a real challenge. It was putting on an acting performance. You get your characters to put on an acting performance, and it wasn't so much about drawing. It was about the performance of the characters, the emotions.
And how did you show those emotions in your characters when you did your animation?
Well, the emotions is a lot that had to do with timing, and putting on again an acting performance in which the characters show the emotion, and how much time does it take to show that particular emotion, whether sadness or happiness, and screen time that takes to get over that. Again, the story point. So everything is story driven. To try to get the audience to forget that they're watching a drawn picture, but to get into the storytelling aspect and to fall in love with the characters. You hate the villain, you in love with the hero or the heroine, and trying to get the emotions of the audience and convey, get them to follow the story points with the characters who are taking the story along.
And in all the things you did with Disney, could you talk about one feature that you did that really stands out to you in terms of how you achieved something that was really difficult?
It's like trying to name your favorite child.
Yeah. Oh, they're all your favorite children, aren't they?
And so the important thing that I would measure the success was how did the audience respond to the character. If a story point call for the character to be sad, is the audience feeling that sadness through the character's acting performance, or whatever emotion that was being conveyed. That would be a successful piece of animation that you say proud of, because it resonates with the audience. The audience was able to follow that stream of thought along.
Well, I remember seeing The Lion King when it came out, and I think everybody in the audience was so drawn into it. The emotions around me were really tremendous. There were people who were sad. There were children that were crying after the papa died. Oh, it was just really, I think that one succeeded in bringing out emotions. Yeah, a lot. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Ron. Thank you. We'll get back to you. Eric, talk about a little bit about your professional background. Let us know where you're coming from the beginning of your graphic design days to where you are now.
Well, actually, it started further back with when I was a kid or in high school. I took up music, and then I took up acting, and during that time my brother's friend was starting he was going to go to college because Disney saw his work and they wanted to put him into the college to go and then work with them afterwards, and that amazed me, and I wanted to take an art class. So I took it in high school. I was a very shy individual, so I figured, what could I do? I had the music, I had the art, and I had the performing. What would bring me out of my shell? And it was the acting, so I pursued that. I did it for a long time, and I was a professional actor and all. I performed at SeaWorld and other locations. And then the show ended, and I wanted to go up to LA, be in the movies. And I did an extra in a movie, and well, I only had so much money. As running out of money and time and everything, I had to get a regular job to put food on the table.
Sure.
And went to a temp agency, and I got hired as a proofer at the Penny Saver. And through the years, I went to school and learned how to be a graphic artist. And I did that for 20 years. My physical challenges I had to go on full disability. I go, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? I go, well, I did art way back in the day. Let's see if I could still do that. And I picked up the pencil, got a few art books, started the draw, and it started from there. And little by little, people were seeing my work. But first, I didn't want to show anyone because it's a very brave thing to show someone your work because they'll be super critical. So people were encouraging me. They go, oh, looks wonderful. And people started asking me, could you draw for me? And it started from there. My wife, on the other hand, she went to art school and everything, and she saw what I could do, and we were both in church, and she asked me to help her draw something, and she encouraged me to do that. And her school went to paint play, and they were teaching art and whatnot, and there was a gallery in there. And she asked the owner, my husband's very good with art, could he display his art in the galleries? And so from that point on, I showed my work, they accepted it, it started in the galleries, and then I started with the first celebrating the arts during the summer, and then the art walk.
Yeah, the big festival through the Monrovia Association of Fine
And the
Art at
rest,
the Park.
the rest is History.
The rest is history.
Yes.
Tell me how you felt doing that first drawing when you went back to drawing.
Well, first, it was a little hard at first.
Sure.
I had to keep on practicing doing it. With anything, you have to keep practicing, and you improve. And I saw the improvement as I went along.
So did you just sketch with charcoal or gray pencils, black pencils, colors? How did you do it?
Graphite pencil.
And graphite is what color? Tell our audience
That's
that.
like a number 2 pencil. But with drawing pencils, there's all different levels. And little did I know, a number 2 pencil is a drawing pencil, but they give that for school and you use it for everything. So I was just using a regular pencil at first, and then we invested in the different shades of the graphite pencil. I started doing that, and I wanted to add color. It's like, how can I get to painting? Let me practice with colored pencils. So I started working with the colored pencil, and I was just doing the colored pencil, but the black, you can only get you can't get 100% with the colored pencil with the black. So I thought, let me try the pen and ink. So I found pens that, first I tried the quilt and I was digging into the paper, but then I found these pens that would able to flow and not scratch or the papers, and so I incorporated that. And it built from there, and I started doing silhouettes, pure pen and ink.
Right. Then how did you get to color?
Well, the color was added first. Then I added the pen and ink. The next step, of recent, I was doing silhouettes of people. The negative. There's the positive, where you draw and you add the ink and whatnot, and then there's the shadow, where you see the negative of the person, and you just draw that.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. Well, I will get back to you. Let's hear from Joan. Joan, could you tell us a little bit about your background and how you became a oil painter?
Oh, Millie, I didn't start young like these gents did. I had been in business and with Foothill Unity Center. I was the director there for many years, and I hadn't realized it, but when I retired, I had no creative outlets. And I had a sick friend, and she actually had art classes in her home with just like 3 or 4 ladies. And I thought, I wanted to go visit her anyway. And so by going over and participating in the art class, I thought, well, if they're not good, if I don't do well, then nobody's going to, I'm not going to be too embarrassed because there aren't too many people here that I know. And so I started that way, and it was, my friend has passed on, but I still am taking art lessons.
There you
And
go.
that's 7 years later.
Oh, that's great.
And I found that I loved painting. It was a wonderful way to be able to create and express. My husband and I do a fair amount of traveling, and I would take photos, and I would come home, and some of them would lend themselves to nice photos, or my family would take a special photo and say, gee, Mom, I'd love to have a painting of this. And I'd do that, and they
that's
loved
wonderful.
it.
Oh, that's great.
And so then I had a couple people ask me to do paintings and things for them, and a little bit of commissioned work. And so I did that, and
So you're moving
they were
forward.
they were very happy. So I have I find my most harshest critic is me.
Sure. I think we can all say that as artists, that we're our own critics. We're our harshest critics.
And that's one of the things I love about oil paintings is I will take them home while I'm working on them, and from my art class and such, and I'll set them up and I'll be looking at them, and I'll see something that isn't quite right, and I fix it. And I love the flexibility of oil paints too,
And
because
you can fix it.
they
yes.
they are very flexible in being able to change things and being able to fix it. It's it seems like a lot of people are scared of the oils, but I've found them to be delightful.
Really delightful. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Ron, I want to get back to you. And this is a book that you wrote. You're also an author, and it's called Quick Sketching. Could you tell us a little bit about what the book is about and why you wrote the book and what you hope to accomplish with this book?
Yeah, the book was written to encourage and inspire artists to draw more. I was encouraged by my high school art teacher in Monrovia High School to carry a sketchbook when I was my junior year in high school. And I've carried a sketchbook consistently since 1967 when I was a junior in high school, 66. And before that, it goes back to my earliest sketchbooks go back when I was 12 years old, 1962. I have sketchbooks dating back that far, and it's just something that I've always gravitated to drawing. And once I went to Disney, it wasn't about the drawing; it was about acting performance. They drummed into animators, animation people that. Characters acting and performance is important, and so that along with what brings that about body language, and how you stand and balance and proportion, perspective, and negative and positive shapes have been mentioned before. All this was very important, but as far as bringing about a performance in your characters, and that lends itself to quick sketching. That's when I graduated from college. I had a portfolio that consisted of fine art illustration type drawings because I wanted to be a commercial artist and do books and magazine illustration. But when I showed Disney my portfolio, the gentleman who looked at my portfolio, Eric Larson, a great animator himself, said, "That's not what we want to see. What we want to see is quick sketches." I hadn't included any quick sketches in my portfolio, so I went home, got a couple of sketchbooks, and dropped them off at the guard gate, addressed to Eric Larson, and a couple of weeks later I got a call that I could enter into their training program that they had. They were bringing, at the time in the early 70s, they had initiated a trainee program to bring in young artists to be trained to be animators. Not that we knew anything, I didn't know anything about animation. I hadn't seen an animated picture in over 10 years. I didn't know what an animator was, didn't know what any of the terminology that was used in filmmaking was about. I could just draw. And it was based on the quick sketching, going back to my high school art teacher encouraging the class to carry a sketchbook. And to this day, I have sketchbooks, and I carry them everywhere. And quick sketching is different from a sketching in a sketchbook where you maybe take 10 or 15 minutes or to do a particular sketch. This is done looking at live action wherever I am. Basketball game, or skateboarding, football game. It's all.
It sounds like you're doing action with quick sketching.
And action is body language. It's communicating a story, and as a writer uses words to communicate, artist uses drawing pictures to communicate. And so you look at it, well, that's a football player. Well, yes, because it's designed to be a football player in action, and you can see what he's doing, but it's done quickly. Maybe a 30-second, 30 to 45 or a minute sketch at the most. And so it's just getting the bare essence of the sketch down. But you've got silhouette value, you've got body type, you've got the actions taking place, but they're just, might say shorthand. If it was a secretary you were dictating something and the secretary was taking shorthand, it would be, that's my shorthand. But it communicates who, what, why, when, where, and how questions that have been asked in that quick sketch.
So that explains what that character is doing on that.
As I was over the years, I quit sketch,
Very good.
lunchtime and all, and my peers at Disney would say, well, you ought to write a book about that. You ought to write a book about it. And eventually I did take the time. It took me 5 years to write it, but it was to
You
basically
did it.
to encourage and inspire artists to draw more. That was the purpose
Very
of that
good.
book.
Very good. Okay, this is a drawing that we have on our screen here. Could you tell us about this drawing? I think it's part of a really large piece that you did called The Wedding. And I think this is maybe 20% of the whole total work that you did.
Yeah,
Could you
yeah.
talk about that and tell us what that little girl is doing, what maybe some of the people behind her are doing? What are you showing by that?
Well, that is communication. Like you said, it's a small part of a bigger piece, maybe 2 or 3% of the bigger piece. But it's communication. And I don't have to tell you what they're doing. I mean, it's self-explanatory. It's the bigger picture is a lot of people being taken, sitting down on benches, having a wedding picture taken after the wedding.
So those are the guests at the wedding.
The guests at the wedding, but you can see that from the quick sketching book that I wrote, we had silhouette value. We had storytelling. We had who, what, when, why, where, and how. We were answering those questions. in
And
the
so
quick
that's what you're
sketch.
answering in that.
And so this is an illustration, but we're using the same basic principles. Good, solid drawing,
Yeah.
balance, proportion, action that's taking place, and everything is communicating. It's readable. And so you can, and it's enough there to where you can make up your own narrative.
Okay, we have another slide here. And this is called The Huzz, and it has several sketches of sports action. Could you talk about what that's about?
Yeah, this is an illustration of the correlation between quick sketching illustration, what we saw with the wedding photograph, and then this is another quick sketch which deals with, you might say, animation. And all you have to do is put in the in-betweens in there, and you can follow the action, and that's what would be termed as extremes in animation. And so from quick sketching, illustration to animation, they're all the same. We're using the same basic principles of silhouette value, where there's drawing involved, there's motion, there's movement that you can follow with your eyes, and so there's no difference between quick sketching, illustration, and animation. The
So
same
it's all
principles.
tied together with
It's
the
all
same
tied
principles
together.
of animation. Very good. Well, those certainly show the actions of the person up there. That's very, very good. Thank you. Let's move on to Eric. And Eric, I want to show a slide of one of your works. And this is obviously an automobile. Could you tell us what that's about and how you drew that?
Well, it's part of a set that I did at the Monrovia Community Center Artist Alley. And usually when I draw and I put stuff in a gallery or in a restaurant, I like to have a whole theme. Not just one drawing, but a whole set. And this is part of the planes, trains, and automobiles
Oh,
off the Steve Martin movie.
oh yeah.
And I figured, I have 9 feet to work with. This one I picked out because it shows a reflection of the tree on the other side, but you see it in the reflection. To reiterate what I was saying is that this is part of a set. When I do things for a restaurant or at a gallery, I always put a theme to it, and I don't just draw one item, one drawing. I do a whole set. And for this one, it's part of a set that's at the Monrovia Community Center called Artist Alley. And in this is planes, trains, and automobiles. And I picked this one out because it says a lot. And it shows the background with the trees and stuff. And on the other side, where with anything with art, you need to show where the light source is. Light source is on the right side. You know, as we're looking at it, it's on the right side, and anything that's shiny, it will give a reflection. And so I wanted to show that in the image, and so that's why you would see the green in the doorway, because it shows the grass on the other side. And then if you go further on the top, you see the top of the tree. It gives the shading of the branches. So, and I wanted to give shading underneath the car to show again the light source of it. So that's what this one's about.
Oh, that is a very good drawing that you did.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's move on to another genre that you're working on. You completed a few boxes for the city of Monrovia, and this one is on Foothill Boulevard. And anybody driving along Foothill can take a look at this and see Charlie Chaplin. Tell us why you did this one.
Well, first off, my performing background, I love Charlie Chaplin, and so it's a reference to my past experience, but also Monrovia's past experience of the filmmakers filming in Monrovia. Now, granted, Charlie Chaplin didn't do a film in Monrovia, but it's representation of that. And again, I themed it, and I wanted it so. Well, how can I represent film and the character? Well, it's like the old film. It has the little holes on each side, and each has a frame, and I was catching different frames, and in it, and I wanted it to wrap around the whole thing.
Well, you
And-
certainly have done that on there. Yeah.
Yeah, and then also the people below is the audience watching the film, and of course you have to title it because people are going to go, "Oh, what's this kid in there?" It's the first full-length movie of Charlie Chaplin. So I tied in history of Monrovia around that time. They didn't have Charlie Chaplin, but they had Laurel and Hardy at the airport.
Oh, the old airport.
Yes, there's a story there.
Well, you'll have to do one of those boxes sometime and show that. Huh?
Well, hopefully.
You did another box, which is in front of the Aztec Hotel on Foothill Boulevard. Could you tell us about this box?
Well, I have a love for Monrovia. I love being here, neighbors, and all that. And I was fascinated about the history. A lot of Monrovia is full of history. And they even have a museum that's talks about the founding fathers of Monrovia. They had pictures of it. You know, these four individuals, and there's they wrote a book, and I got a lot of the information from the book, but I had a tour from the Monrovia Historic Museum. They told me in depth about this because I'm thinking I could do a box with these four individuals on there, and it would give a brief history of not just Mr. Monroe, but the other three other individuals. There was 5 altogether, but there's no picture of the fifth one, so I can only put 4 images on each side.
Yeah. When you paint the boxes, I'm curious about what kind of paint do you use?
Well, we're told to use the oil base for the primer, so it grips
Yes.
onto the metal, and then we're told to use acrylic, outside acrylic, and well, first I have to pencil everything out.
Right.
I actually did I actually drew each individual first with the graphite pencil, then I inked it, then I took a picture of it, then I put it on the computer, and my wife is great at enlarging on the computer. I'm still baffled how she does it, but she helped me in that area so I could, it's, you know, very big versus small like this.
Yes.
And so able to enlarge it, and then I put pencil in the back, and then I transfer it onto the box itself. Then I have to go back and start painting and taping everything off, and it's a very long process.
How long did it take to do that box?
This one took about 2 weeks. The Charlie Chaplin one took about 2.5 because it was my first one. My wife is also did one too, and I helped her with hers. And so mine, the Charlie Chaplin, was the guinea pig. Okay, any mistakes, I learned from that, and then we did hers, and then when I did this one went pretty fast
Oh, good.
because
It looks really
got the
great.
hang of you know how many layers of paint that goes on, and it's a very long process. You
It
have
is
to
a process.
tape everything off so you get nice sharp lines.
Well, that certainly looks very sharp and very, very well done.
Thank you.
for sharing that. Joan, let's move on to you. I'm going to show a painting that you did, and I believe you said this was your very first oil painting. Could you tell us about that?
It was quite a challenge. This was a waterfall up in Canada called Bridal Veils up near Chilliwack, up in Vancouver, near Vancouver. And it was such an amazing picture that when my art teacher told me so I picked this one. She said, well, this is a little difficult, but then she also said, well, I want you to use nothing but palette knives. And I thought, oh my. So I really learned a lot about using palette knives. Here I was brand new, didn't really understand brushes and different things with that, and here I was doing palette knives. But as it turned out, it was something that I really enjoyed doing, and everybody says, you did that? So I was kind of like, wow, this is fun.
Now, what I want to ask you about is the first time you put oil paint on a brush, how did you feel scooping up that buttery oil paint on that brush and then applying it to a blank canvas? What kind of feeling did you have with that? Because you're looking at a blank canvas and you have
That's
to put
right.
something on there.
Well, it was scary at first, and I was a little apprehensive because I had never really done this type of thing before. And as I learned, if I didn't like what I did, I could go over it. I became much more at ease and much freer to be able to do things. So it was exciting. It was a new way of being creative. It was we would have nice music playing, and we would just chat with the other people in the class type of thing, and it just kind of would come out and end up happening, and it was fun. I loved it.
Sounds like fun. It sounds like you had a really good time. This is another painting that you've done. Could you tell us about the barn and the fields and the trees and the scenery there?
This was up in northern Washington, up on the Olympic Peninsula, in a little town called Sequim. And every year they have the lavender festivals, and the lavender was blooming, and the pictures were amazing. They were really fun to photograph, and even more fun to paint, to try and capture. God gives us an amazing world, and to be able to try to capture some of the colors and feelings that you get is the challenge.
How did you choose the colors for that particular painting?
I mixed most of them using other colors until it felt like it was It was right. I kind of work off of photographs a lot. If I have a good photograph that I enjoy, then I will use that to try and guide me with my colors and my subject matters.
What kind of brush did you use to paint the purple lavender on there?
You will laugh. I have found that especially for some of the trees and things, some of my older brushes that get kind of scrunched up make wonderful leaves and trees and allow you to create without having a perfectly smooth, to be able to have a little more interest in it and to use that. So I save all my yucky brushes.
Do you do that too, Eric, with your
Yes.
material?
I use different brushes, especially when I was doing the faces and you have the shadow. You use a different technique rather than the solid black. You would do some blending, and some of the brushes, go weird on you. It's like you utilize the weirdness and makes the image unique.
What are your favorite brushes, Joan? Do you have any favorite brushes that you use consistently?
It depends on what I'm painting. Fine brushes, when you're going into detail. When a painting like this usually I will accomplish in 2 to 3 weeks, but this is like 3 hours a week, but maybe a total on this painting, maybe 5 or 6 hours. I haven't really, and it, with oils, I sometimes have to let them set for a while because they'll start blending when I don't want them to blend. So then I have to let it set for a while and work on it and dry for a few days. It takes an oil painting over a year to be completely dry.
It does, yes.
So that's
Yes.
one of the bad things, if you want to say.
But there are a lot of good things too to
There
painting with
are.
oils. A
There
lot of
are.
good things.
There are.
Let's move on to another painting you did. This painting here. Could you tell
Oh.
us where this painting was?
This was done in a forest in northern Idaho.
Oh.
And I've actually started, I love light coming through the trees and the way lights will shine. It feels like God speaking to you a little bit. It becomes almost a spiritual feeling. And this was an interesting perspective of the trees and having the lights shine through them. And again, I was able to use some of my yucky brushes in making the leaves and things. But it's fun. It's fun.
Do you remember how you felt standing under those trees?
Yeah, it was beautiful. It was beautiful. And like I say, I'm finding that more and more I am trying to incorporate light of some form coming into things in my paintings. It just feels like something that I enjoy doing, and it's kind of special. It makes it more special.
I think that there are moments in our life when we know that we're an artist. Did you have a moment in your life, even before you started to paint, that you just knew you were an artist and you knew you wanted to paint?
No.
No. So that happened when you first picked up your paints to paint?
You know what? I'm still proving that to myself.
So it's an ongoing evolution.
It's an ongoing evolution.
growth.
And I guess that kind of happens as other people start appreciating your work a little bit. Being there at the gallery and having people say, "Oh, you do such beautiful work." It helps you to feel like, well, maybe I have a talent here. You know, I was quite old when I started, and I do it more for my own creativity and things. So I just, yeah.
Ron, when did you first know you were an artist?
I was 4 years old.
4 years old,
years old,
my.
Living in Monrovia, we, my mom and I, we lived in 14 different houses here in the
Oh,
city of Monrovia
my.
back in coming up. And I can remember specific periods in my life when, from various houses we lived in. We lived on Walnut, right down the street there at the time. And the house we lived in, we lived up top, and then there's a basement in the house. And the house was sold, so the people who bought the house lived up top, and we moved down to the basement. And I remember taking comic books and wax paper, old wax paper. You could scrape it and get wax in your finger. Well, that old wax paper, and putting over comic book covers and tracing those. And I remember I was 4 years old because we didn't have a television, and we didn't get a television until we had moved, and I was 5 years old on Maple Street. So I can date back the time when I first realized, or my first remembrance of drawing. I can't say that was the first time I had drawn, but my first remembrance of being able of drawing down in the basement with the comic book and the wax paper. So for me, drawing has been it's been so natural. It's like singing. You just sing all the time, and for me, drawing, I drew all the time, and it just wasn't anything that said, "Oh wow, I'm an artist." It's just something that came so natural that I just did it and enjoyed doing it. Coming up as a kid, and as I got older, and getting the approval, like Joan said, the approval of others seeing what I was doing and saying, okay, they like what I'm doing, I'm just going to continue to do, but I wasn't doing it for others' approval. It's just because I enjoyed it so much, just to draw.
And as you were growing up in Monrovia as a child in school, you went to first grade, second grade, third grade. What did your friends think about your drawing?
Well, I was just always known as the guy that could draw. Just loved doing it, and I was just the guy who could draw. I mean, coming up, the guy who was the best hokey pokey dancer, the person who was the best, the fastest runner in the class. So it wasn't that big a deal to have a moniker that he was the best artist, because everybody can do something. And for myself, it was being able to draw and draw well. But it was more that I just enjoyed what I was doing.
As you moved on through school, what about high school? Were you known as the artist who drew in high school?
Oh yeah. And I took it pretty much for granted. In high school, freshman, sophomore, junior, art, and one teacher, Miss Dorothy Clemens, who was art teacher for all 4 divisions, and I didn't even take art my freshman year. I did it on the side. I doodle on my homework papers. I just was drawing, so that was enough for me. And then I took a class in my sophomore year, and I signed up. And actually, you're supposed to take classes in succession, freshman, sophomore. So if you were a junior, you still had to take freshman, sophomore. But Mrs. Clemens allowed me to take sophomore without taking a freshman.
She saw your talent, I bet.
Apparently so, and so I took in my junior year. Miss Clemens kicked me out of class.
Oh my! Why did she kick you out of class?
I was being a jerk, and I deserved to be kicked out of class. And she kicked me out of class. But before she had kicked me out of class, my junior year, she had encouraged the class to carry sketchbooks. So I took her advice, and literally I'm sitting before you now because I took her advice. Because carrying a sketchbook, it got me hired at Disney. It's gotten me writing a book. It's a whole foundation is based on taking drawing seriously, drawing a little bit every day. Because in order to be good at anything, you have to do it on a consistent basis. And
all because of your high school teacher, huh?
Because of my high school teacher. I had sketchbooks going back to '62 when I was 12 years old.
Sure.
And I'm 16, 17 years old in high school. I'm still doing sketchbooks, but to carry one consistently and not pick one up, fill it up, put it down, pick up another one, over and over and over for years and years and years. And I've got hundreds of sketchbooks, literally. You know,
That is amazing. That is just amazing. Eric, when did you first know you were an artist?
When I took the class in high school, we were doing, it was an introduction to art. So we did ceramics, we did painting, we did perspective drawing, we did the grid work where you hit the position and everything. And I was always fascinated with the perspective, and I excelled at the perspective and the detail. There was this one drawing that I did, peppermint, there was a peppermint stick in a soda, and it showed the ice, the bubbles, and the stick, and you know, with water it distorts it, and so I had to show all that in there, and I enjoyed the heck out of drawing that.
And you knew that was it.
I knew that was it for there.
Oh, that's great. Wow, thank you all so much for sharing so much about your backgrounds, your journeys in art, and for being here today. Now, is there anything that any of you want to say that I didn't cover today? About your art, your creating, where you are now, the evolution of yourself as an artist, any of those topics in just a few minutes.
I just want to say thank you for inviting us all here tonight to be able to get the word about art out. So in so many elementary schools, even junior high schools, the arts is missing. You know, even the playing musical instruments, you know, all the arts are lacking. So this gives an opportunity to showcase that you know, there's art appreciation, and just being exposed to art and artists. So I appreciate you doing this.
Well, thank you. Anything that you'd like to add?
Oh.
Joan?
Oh, I have joined a group called the Monrovia Association of Fine Arts, and they made me treasurer. And so we're on the board, and Eric is also on the board. But this group is really doing a lot to try and get more art into the community. They've opened a gallery at the Monrovia Community Center, and all of us, we're kind of the first to be showcased there, and that's really been a lot of fun. But they also have meetings every month so that new people can come in, and whether you enjoy art or just want to support the arts, it's a good group to be a part of, and I think it's a really good thing to be a part of. So.
It is, and Monrovia is getting to be known as a city of the arts. So that's something that we all see as we walk through the city and talk to other artists about art in Monrovia. Well, thank you all for talking, and I think that you, Eric, would like to say something to close us off here.
Well, just what do we all have for the future? What are our future plans from this day forward? For me, I've already designed another utility box, and hopefully that will happen. I'm going to put my stuff in other galleries and restaurants and whatnot, and perhaps they can share what they're going to do from now for the future.
Joan?
I will keep on painting. It is so much fun. And I really want to encourage others that even if you really hadn't thought about it or said, oh, I'm not an artist, because that was me. I said, no, I can't do that. And when you try it, you just might like it. So don't be afraid to try a little artwork. It's fun.
Well, that's a nice ending to our show today. Let's all keep on painting and trying to be the best artist we can be. And Ron, I think that you're moving forward with teaching. You're teaching at several universities, and you visited Japan in the past and taught about sketching. What are you doing right now?
Right now, I'm working on my own another painting piece. I'm engaged in teaching at the Art Center in Mount Sackle, pick up next week, and preparing to go on a couple of speaking engagements, one in Las Vegas there's an event in Chicago and South Africa that I'll be
So you are traveling.
traveling around. And the good thing about the itinerary in South Africa is I'll have opportunity to go to a village and to teach some underprivileged kids to draw and to have a little workshop and encouragement in that area.
That's wonderful. Well, we're all moving forward. You're all continuing your art. And I will say thank you to our viewers. Thank you to our guests for joining us today and talking about art. That's it.
Thank you.